Have you ever heard of a kingdom, rich in gold, that controlled huge trade routes and then just vanished? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on South Africa's very first kingdom, a place of incredible power and a deep, enduring mystery. We are talking about Mapungubwe. All right, so how are we going to tackle this incredible story? First, we'll dive right into the mystery of its collapse. Then we'll see how it stacks up against its famous successor, Great Zimbabwe. After that, we'll get our hands dirty and look at the clues they left behind, trace the timeline of its rise and fall, and finally, really understand why this ancient kingdom is still so important to us today. Okay, so we're starting at the end of the story. You might be asking, how could a kingdom that was at the absolute peak of its power just disappear? Well, figuring out why it fell is actually the key to understanding the whole thing. To solve this mystery, you have to think of historians as detectives. They're sifting through the evidence, asking the big questions. What on earth could bring down a kingdom this powerful? Was it something in nature, or was it something human? Well, it turns out it wasn't just one single thing. It was more like a perfect storm. They used up their resources, the water, the wood, everything. Then the climate itself turned on them. And this is huge. The trade routes, the very thing that made them rich, started to shift away. All of that pressure just boiled over, leading to fighting among themselves, which left them vulnerable to attack. So, with all these different factors in the mix, what's the one central question, the real puzzle, that historians are trying to solve when they look back at this time? When you boil it all down, it comes back to one word: trade. The flow of goods from deep in the continent out to the coast, that was the engine for everything. If you can figure out how and why that engine started to sputter and fail, well, then you understand how a mighty kingdom like Mapungubwe could just fade into history. Now, as Mapungubwe's light was dimming, a new power was rising just to the north, and we're talking about the legendary Great Zimbabwe. By putting these two great kingdoms side by side, we start to see a really fascinating story unfold. Both of these kingdoms organize their people in a very similar way. But Great Zimbabwe, they took that system and they literally built it into the landscape. They made the social order something you could see with your own eyes, carved into the very stones of their city. The term for this is a social hierarchy. The easiest way to think about it is like a pyramid. You've got a few really powerful people right at the top, and then everybody else forms the wide base at the bottom. At Great Zimbabwe, this wasn't just an idea. It was the actual blueprint they used to build their home. And this is just incredible, right? It perfectly shows how they saw the world. Your social status literally determined your physical altitude. The king, he lived at the absolute highest point, safe behind these massive stone walls, looking down on everyone, literally and figuratively. Below him, you had the elites on the hillsides, and way, way down in the valley lived the common people. So, a society this organized, this grand, how did they pay for it all? Well, if you're thinking trade, you are absolutely right. Just like Mapungubwe before them, the answer was a massive international trade network. They were the gatekeepers for all these priceless resources. From the interior, we're talking gold, iron, and ivory from elephants. They would trade these things with merchants on the coast for incredible luxury goods from halfway around the world, like beautiful glass beads, fine cloth, and all sorts of exotic pottery. Okay, this is all a great story. But how do we know any of it is actually true? Well, the proof, as they say, is literally buried in the ground. So let's take a look at the clues archaeologists have been digging up. With a lot of careful digging, archaeologists can basically bring this lost world back to life. They're on the hunt for any clue about daily life, what people were eating, who they were trading with, and exactly how their whole society was structured. And the evidence paints this really clear picture of a divided society. The rich elites, they lived up on the hill in these bog stone houses, physically separated from everybody else. And get this, even their garbage tells a story. Ancient trash pits show that the rich ate way more meat, while the commoners mostly ate simple grains. It's the exact same story when you look at their graves. Elites were buried with gold objects, commoners with simple clay pots. The evidence for their economy is just as amazing. Archaeologists have found the remains of their crops and animal bones, which proves they were really skilled farmers. But then they found things that just shouldn't be there. Glass beads from India, pieces of pottery from China. This is hard proof they were part of a huge global network. And the bones of elephants and rhinos? That tells us they were hunting these animals for high-value goods like ivory to power that trade. All right, we've got all these different pieces of the puzzle, so let's put them in order on a timeline. By figuring out the age of these different sites, we can actually watch this society grow from just a small village into a full-blown kingdom. So the story kicks off around 900 AD with the first farmers in the area. About a century later, a new group comes in and builds a pretty big town called K2. Then, in 1220, we get the big moment. The leaders move up onto Mapungubwe Hill, creating that class-based society we've been talking about. But here's the shocking part. Their golden age, it was incredibly short. After only 50 years at the top of their game, the whole place was abandoned, just gone. So finally, let's talk about why this ancient kingdom, one that didn't even last that long, is so important. Not just for South Africa, but really for the whole world. So what's the big takeaway here? After all this, why do we, hundreds of years later, still talk about this place? What's the bottom line? Mapungubwe was a complete game changer. It was the region's first real city, a complex urban place. It was also the first society around here to be organized by social class. Its importance is so massive that in 2003, UNESCO named it a World Heritage Site. That puts it in the same league as the Pyramids of Giza or the Great Wall of China. It's a treasure that belongs to all of us. The one thing you have to remember is that Mapungubwe wasn't just another settlement. It was a capital city. It was a hub of power and new ideas. You could even say it was the blueprint for the great kingdoms that came later, like Great Zimbabwe. It set up a model for how to run a society and how to trade that would shape this part of the world for centuries to come. And all of this brings us to one final, really powerful question. We've just seen how this amazing kingdom collapsed because of a mix of things: climate change, using up all their resources, and conflict over a shifting economy. Does any of that sound familiar? As we face our own challenges today, what lessons can we and should we learn from the silent stones of Mapungubwe?